So welcome everyone, good evening, and thank you to Rachel for setting up. I think she'll join shortly. So the topic of tonight's mini class is marriage, the Rambam's bizarre advice for a happy marriage. So there's a joke, a woman walks into the kitchen to find her husband stalking around with a fly swatter. She says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm hunting flies." "Oh, have you killed any?" She said. "Yep. 3 males and 2 females," he says. So she's intrigued. She says, "How can you tell the difference between them?" He responds, "Well, 3 were on the beer can, 2 were on the phone." It's a silly joke. What it means is that we have these assumptions. We have these assumptions that people have roles, and they have to fit into those roles. Men and women have certain defined parameters, interests, talents, and lack thereof. And it's sort of the stereotype that offends us because, of course, people are diverse, people are complex. And once, I can tell you that certainly once I had a daughter, but even before that, to realize that we want to put any gender into a certain set of parameters is minimizing. To suggest that women have to fit in certain roles, to say that men have to fit certain roles, it's offensive. On the other hand, we acknowledge the biological, physiological, emotional reality that is the differences between men and women, which makes it, of course, complex when they try to get along and live in one house. So that's really what this is about. I want to share, I guess, these slides with you. I don't know if it's something that you guys can see. Someone let me know if you could see it on screen. All right.
Yes, we could see.
Okay. All right. So the Rambam's bizarre advice for a happy marriage. All right. So let me try. Okay. What did I just do? I think I just added a slide. That's not what you guys wanted. All right. So this is one of those stereotypes that I always found hilarious, right? Here's a man's desktop. Here's a woman's desktop. Right? Typical office space. I can tell you that my desktop definitely looks like the upper one. And I can tell you that an area that my wife would set up would certainly look like the one on the bottom. This is a man's desktop on the computer screen, right? And this stereotype may not ring true for you. This is certainly something that resonates with me because it's totally true in my family. You know, my electronic files are completely organized. They're all neatly put into one folder, which is like sort of contains many other folders. Everything's in place. I know exactly where to find everything. And this is exactly what Tzipporah's desktop will look like. But then the reverse, on the outside, sort of chaos. It looks like Hurricane Andrew came into my office and tossed papers all over the place. And this is the opposite for her. So why do we have these differences? What drives us? What makes us? And I'm not saying this rings true. You might find this offensive. You might not find it. I think it's a cute way to open up the discussion. What is it that drives us and makes us really sense that we have different modes of behavior, right? That's the question. So allow me to share the Rambam. And of course, when you think about this Rambam, you might instantly sort of be repelled by it and say that's sort of archaic. That's not the way. That's not the way men and women need to be treated. We're all independent. We're all individuals, right? But take a look at the Rambam's advice. V'chein tzivu chachamim. The Chacham commanded, "Sheyeh adam mechabed es ishto." Sounds good. A person should honor his wife. Yes, or migufo, more than himself. All right. So no, I don't think anyone on this shir is going to disagree with that sentiment. That sounds good so far. Although there are those with contemporary sensibilities who are offended by gestures of sort of gestures of opening the door and the sort of old-fashioned notion that a man has to be chivalrous in his conduct and his treatment of a woman. But he has to love her like he loves himself. If he has money, he should spend money on her. Great. As the amount of money he has, so you should spend on her. So you have a lot of money, you spend, you buy a lot of nice things. If you have a little bit of money, you spend that money that you have. Don't be excessively, don't be fear-mongering. Don't place upon her extra fear. Right? Don't shout a lot. Don't intimidate someone else. Don't bully. Yediburo ima benachas. You should speak with her in a pleasant way. Lo ye'atzav velo roges. And then it says advice for a man. You want to be attractive? Don't be overly mopey and sad and depressed, and don't be an angry person. Right? This fits the Rambam's typical mode of instruction. Take the shvil hazav, take the middle path, take the mean that is not overly angry, not overly sort of sad, and right. Also, you shouldn't be too silly and too dopey, and you shouldn't be too grouchy. Right? You have to be somewhere in the middle of these things. Have a good sense of humor, but be serious. So that's the Rambam's advice. But before he gets to the part about the personality balance, he says basically, essentially, the way in which a man should mechabet a woman is to spend money on her. Okay. And to be nice. It's not revolutionary, but it's also not sort of, it's not something we expect from the profound thinker that is the Rambam. Chacham also commanded us, and by the way, he could have quoted from hundreds of different Mamari Chazal about Ish Ishto, about husband and wife. And this is what he chose to quote. Now you want to know how to treat the husband. You have to be mechaveh him, show him a lot of respect, more than he deserves. The yellow alea more. You should have some awe and fear of him. Tasek. Here he sits in his throne. Show respect for him. Tasek kol ma'aseh al piv, and everything he says to do, you should do. Right? It's a bit it's a bit shocking when we see this stuff. It doesn't resonate with modern sensibilities. It also doesn't sound like something a real thinker would say. Tasek kol ma'aseh al piv, right? All of her actions should be based on whatever he says. Yebeineha kimo sar. Now it gets even better. He has to be in her eyes like a sar. What's a sar? A ruler. He has to be like a king in his castle. She has to view him as the king. O melech ma'aleches betayvat libo meracheket kol sheyisna. So that she has to distance everything that he hates. Whatever he hates, get it out of the house. If there's a conversation about something that you know that will upset him, don't talk about it. Treat him like a king. Basically, walk around on. Be careful. Walk around on eggshells around him. This is the way of holy daughters and sons of Israel. Bezivugan, when they are married, ubidrachim elu ye yishuvan nae umeshuvach. You want to give advice for a young couple? I remember years ago, Rav Aaron Felder, who was the one of the main Talmidim of Moshe Feinstein. He had a shul in Philadelphia, and I did a Torah tours there. I don't know if you know what Torah tours is. When YU and Stern used to send out couples to the communities on Shavuos and Simchas Torah. So we went on Torah tours for Shavuos, I think it was, and we were supposed to teach in the community. We went to the community of Rav Aaron Felder. There's a real gadol b'Yisrael, and Posek, a giant. So I was actually, Tzipor and I were engaged. So it was like, this was a Torah tours for engaged couples, because they don't want to waste space if they can make a possible shidduch. So they sent me and Tzipor, and then there was another couple, the Platts. They were also there. So anyway, so after Yantif, I went to see Rav Felder. He gave me a copy of his sefer, and we went down to his basement. His study is just packed with svarim wall to wall. And he says, "You're getting married, and I'll give you advice." And I thought it was so funny. It was like he says to me, I'm trying to figure out how to let someone into the room. Sorry. Okay. So Rav Aaron Felder says, listen, for the first year or so, whatever she says, you do. And then afterwards, you can do whatever you want. I was thinking, this is crazy. So it was more of a yeshivish mentality. He was kind of joking around. But to be serious for a moment, the Rambam is basically saying, if you want to be happy, right, all you have to do is you have to show incredible respect for your husband, treat him like a king. Don't say anything that will upset him, right, lest he go into some rage, and then he'll be a happy man. He's a king. And if you want a happy wife, spend money on her, right? Don't shout. Don't get too complicated with emotions, or just easygoing in the house, and speak pleasantly, and make sure you buy a nice. The Rambam talks about afterwards about buying little trinkets, buying jewelry, things like that. Okay, great. That's the recipe for happy marriage. So what is the Rambam talking about? Where does the Rambam get this from? So I want to move on to the next. Okay. So we often think of marriage, this sort of the search for the other half, the missing piece. In fact, it's a Chazal. The Chazal say, "Gemara in Brachos, Samachal Paralf, Du Partzufim Bara Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'Adam Harishon Shneimar Achal V'Kedem Tzarasan." Kadosh Baruch Hu created man back and front. In other words, the original form of the human being. There's actually two stories, two different narratives in the Chumash, but according to one version in the narrative of Bereshis, Adam and Chava were connected sort of back to back. It was one person, and they were sort of back to back with each other. So if you wanted to see them, you had to hold up one of these mirrors like they have in the barber shop, where you have to see what your spouse looked like. You have to, like they always want to show you the back of your hair after a haircut, as if you have a real opinion about how the back of your hair looks. But okay, they always want to show you the back of your hair. So that's what Adam and Chava looked like. And then the Zohar Kadosh says that Kadosh Baruch Hu on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Nesira, the day of division, Kadosh Baruch Hu sawed Adam and Chava in half, divided them into two. But originally there was one. There was one person, and now the Gemara Kedushin says the way is Baal Aveda Mechazer Al Aveda. So the owner of a lost object has to search for lost items. So what do? We spend our lives now looking for the missing piece. Shel Silverstein describes. That's why there's this sort of this innate drive to find the person. And then when God forbid we discover they don't quite fit in, they're not like me, or though their upbringing was different than mine, or they have different tastes than I do, or they this one appreciates cleanliness and this one doesn't. This one appreciates time, being on time, and the other person doesn't appreciate being on time. God forbid the person that I thought was my soulmate isn't exactly like me, doesn't fit perfectly, and it's a devastating blow to the ego. It's a horrible feeling because deep down inside we kind of sense that this person has to fit perfectly, but in reality, it's sort of the opposite. The person has to be Ezer Kenegdo. Ezer Kenegdo means a helper who is the opposite. A helper is someone who's not like me, Bichlam. But that doesn't fit with the Rambam. The Rambam says, don't be critical, don't shout, don't correct, tell your husband he's always right. I don't understand. What kind of Ezer Kenegdo is saying is a yes woman. Yes, honey, you're always right, you're always right. That's not very helpful, not very productive to build a marriage based on never disagreeing and never pointing out inconsistencies or problems. So the imagery we get of how Adam and Chava start out and the notion that we're always looking for that missing section, I think is informative. To understand what drives man, right? You have to understand his deep down fear. And I heard this idea years ago from Weinberger and seen it in Svarim since then as well. Kadosh Baruch Hu created man as dust from the earth. Mankind comes from the dirt. It's the greatest fear of Adam is predicated on the reality of his origins. Where does Adam come from? Nothing. Dirt. It's worthless. Afar ve'efer. Right? The expression that I'm worthless. So this is a crippling reality for many men, because Adam always fears that, and this is something that many men struggle with, that God forbid it's going to be revealed that he's really not all he's cracked up to be. That he sold you on a bill of goods. He presented this visage, this image of some sort of powerful, capable, intelligent, funny, right? Every koach, kol yachol. And then all of a sudden you peel back the layers and you realize he's vulnerable, he's weak, he's tired, he has a poor attention span. And then you peel back layers more and more and more, and then the kochos become more and more debilitating over time. And eventually man returns back to his original state, back to the afar, back to the dirt from which he came. So what is Adam's greatest fear? What causes him more anxiety than anything else in the world is that he comes from nothing and that he's going back to nothing. And that's why men have egos. Everyone has an ego, and really have an ego issue. Why? Because he knows that he's nothing. And the moment you remind him of that, it destroys the reality that he's needed to construct for himself in order to function during the 120 years that he's in this world. So the moment he remembers how he's really nothing, it can be devastating. So the Rambam says, okay, great. You want to make sure you don't destroy it. Because I think the so to any marriage is to know what is the weakness of the other person and to never ever exploit it. The reason why marriage is an intimate relationship is because you know the things about each other that make them tick. You must never step on those nerves. And when they need to be operated upon, extraordinarily delicate process, and that's where it's important to have other people assist. Everyone thinks they're going to get married, they're going to fix the other person so that they match me, right? I'll fix them up. So I drove it to Borough. When we were dating, I had these disgusting brown shoes that were like, they were just gross, shredded. I was in college for a couple of years, I didn't care. And she said, I really liked you, but those shoes were awful. So I remember she bought me a pair of shoes. Like that was like the first gift. And I remember thinking, that's so sweet. I really like the shoes she bought me. But also in the back of my head, I said, oh, you know what? You didn't like my dirty shoes? There's this drive that we have to fix the other person. And we have to make sure that in doing so, in trying to correct, we don't point out the most vulnerable element. The most vulnerable element for most men is the reality that they come from nothing and they're going back to nothing. You accomplish nothing. You earn nothing this week. What do you make? There's no money in the account. You can't fix that. You can't construct something. You can't build anything. You can't create anything. There's an emptiness that every man feels when he realizes that he can't do it. He just doesn't have that koach, right? Not a real man. Because a real man is supposed to be someone who runs away from the reality of dirt. So what is kavod? What is respect? What is the shoresh of kavod? I'll write kavod on the screen here. The shoresh of kavod is kaved, heavy. So men like things that are heavy, like cars, and big things to fill up space. They like to buy real estate, and they like things that make them feel as if they've occupied a real space on this earth. They own a piece of land. They've conquered something, right? They close the deal. There's nothing better than coming home from a hard day where I closed the deal today. I accomplished something. Leave your mark on this earth. It's every man's deepest wish. I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but most men, their deepest wish is not to have kids and to bring to the world, even though it's very painful when people can't have kids. Most men's deepest wish is to make an impact in the world, to make sure the world knows that they were here, that they made a difference. And if kids are part of that, great, it's wonderful. If you could have 100 children as part of your kingdom, those children will carry on your name. Very important to men. That's where ego comes from. The truth that you know you're nothing and you're going back to nothing. What is Chava's biggest fear? Because Chava doesn't come from dirt, right? What does Chava come from? Sorry. Chava comes from, comes from Adam's rib, right? Vayapel Hashem Elokim Tardema al ha'adam vayishan vayikach achas mitzalosa vayisgor basar tachtena. God put Adam to sleep. He had put Adam to sleep because he never agreed to having one of his major organs removed if he was awake. And tardema is the word that is used for a deep slumber. Tardema is like a very deep slumber. So Kadosh Baruch Hu puts Adam to sleep, general anesthesia, and takes out sal-o-sav, which is either a rib or a tail. It's one of those. The Chazal have different interpretations. Vayizgor basar tachtena. And then he sealed up the flesh underneath. He closed up the flesh of Adam after removing that rib. So what does Chava come from? What is the source of Chava, right? So Chava doesn't come from dirt. She doesn't come from nothing, right? Chava comes from something. She comes from Adam. So her deepest, darkest fear in the world is that all she will be is just an appendage of Adam. I don't want to just be the woman belonging to this man. Even the name woman is offensive. Woman, it's like of man, she belongs to, right? It's the whole thing is like, wow, she's just really this appendage that just sort of, she was ripped out of him, and her whole life she's just in his shadow. And so a lot, feels, at least the Rambam interprets this, a lot of the fear, the anxiety that women have comes from this idea that I'm an independent person. I went to school, I could hold a job, I could be CEO, a man could be a CEO, a woman could be a CEO. Why not? What's the difference? It's true. You could accomplish all of that. That's not the question bichlal. But deep down inside, a lot of this comes from the drive to be other. I'm not just Mrs. this person. One of the most offensive things, people find it so offensive when you send a letter in the mail and it says Mrs. and where the wife outranks the husband, like she has like 5 doctorate degrees and he doesn't. So yet they write Mr. or Mrs. this as a letter to the wife, as if she's just sort of this attachment to him and she's not worth her own rights. So what does the Rambam say? Let's look at the Rambam. Rambam says, listen, be very careful with sensitive points, things that steer us, right? Before we get to the Rambam, just a minute, what is the Yetzer Hara of each of these things? We know where an ego can go to terrible places. A man with an ego, a man who his whole life he's running away from the reality that he's nothing, can be incredibly destructive. Be so destructive because he could spend his life trying to prove that he's a man, that he's something, that he's going to make his mark on the world. And if he can't do it in a productive, holy way, he's going to do it in a treacherous way. Because as long as he could be famous or infamous, it doesn't matter as long as he's famous, right? It makes no difference as long as people know his name. The guy who killed John Lennon, right? I forgot his name now. Famously said that he just wanted people to know who he was. He just wanted to be remembered. He's the guy who killed John Lennon. So that's the destructive part of ego. You could say things that are just terribly hurtful to other people because you want to prove that you're stronger. You want to prove you're tougher. You could be you could be afraid to admit that you're in pain or you need help because you got this together. In fact, I'm not going to pull over and ask for directions if I'm running an hour late, right, is a typical male stereotype. Where does the stereotype come from? I'm not saying it's universally true, but the fact the stereotype is there means it's at least partially true. And the refusal to take instructions, the refusal to get help comes from this idea that I don't need help. I got it all. I don't come from dirt. It's a denial of that reality. And when you live in denial of that reality, you refuse to accept help. So when you genuinely reach out and try to help him, he shuts down. He's like, leave me alone. I don't need help. What do you mean? I love you. I'm trying to help you. No. That's admitting that reality that I'm nothing. And so the Rambam says, be very careful with that. Very careful not to step on that nerve. Understand that he has to live with the fiction, at least, that when he arrives home, at some point, he's the king. Maybe he was beat up all day in work, right? But at some point in his life, Adam has to feel like he's the sole occupier of this earth, that he has a dalet amos that belonged to him. There's these, you see the way people behave on airplanes. Back in the day, we used to fly on these things called airplanes, and you have like the first class, people who fly in first class because their work pays for it and they feel so special in this. And then they arrive like 5 hours later, they sit and they have a few drinks on the plane, and then they get totally beat up in the boardroom, right? But for like 4 or 5 hours on the plane, they feel like the king of the world. And then they go back and they go home. They realize the kids don't respect them. Their life is a mess. This one's sick. They get on that little oasis where they can pretend that there's something good going on in their lives. The Rambam wants you to be sensitive. So who's going to rein in this man? Whose job is it to rein in the Baal Kavod, the one who seeks Kavod? The Rambam doesn't think it's the wife's job to be his Baal Musar. The Rambam doesn't think that's not the way he interprets Ezer Kenegdo. He says you have to build a person up, find their good qualities, find where they excel, and show them that they're really good at something, that they really have that ability, because deep down inside, this macho man is so much smaller than you know. And now what is the Yetzer Hara with Chava? Chava, who comes from not nothing, she comes from something. She doesn't struggle with ego. She doesn't care as much if he is passed up on the promotion. It's the worst feeling in the world. If she is, it's hurtful, but it's hurtful because she's not appreciated. Chava wants to be appreciated. And so if you want to show recognition of Adam, you buy him something heavy, kavod, kaved, right? You buy a man flowers, it's the worst thing in the world because they're going to die and he's going to die and he doesn't want to hear about flowers because it's a reminder of the truth. If you buy your wife flowers and they're beautiful and they fit and it's the right time, so she might appreciate them. I'm not saying all women appreciate flowers, but I can tell you that most men will not appreciate flowers at all. It's meaningless to them. And many women have told me, at least the ones in my life, have told me they like flowers. I always tell guys when I give this to guys, don't make the mistake, because when you're told to buy flowers, that's not when you want to buy flowers. You want to buy them when you're not told to buy flowers. But why would anyone like something like that? It's going to die. It's worthless. You need to spend money on it. It's an arrangement. It's because it's something that shows that you stopped in the middle of your busy day, following the stock market and running around and going carpool and dealing with some aggravation on the phone and trying to trying to deal with the warranty on the car. And you stopped in your busy day and for half a second you thought about her. She wasn't just this appendage whose job it is to stoke your ego, to make you feel good, and to cook you dinner. She's an independent person, worthy of attention, affection, love, support, and you bought her something nice. It could be little, it doesn't make a difference. Most men who get like a little kind of sentimental gift, they may say they like it, but they really don't. They like stuff, they like gadgets, they like things that make them feel that they're reign on earth permanent one. But according to what at least the Rambam is suggesting, is that a woman would appreciate something that shows you thought of her, whether or not it was $1,000 or a few dollars. Just that you thought she was worth your time and your money. She was worth that attention. So the Rambam says something that looks to be antiquated, archaic, and almost, and silly and trite. I think what he's really saying is understand the person's sensitivities, no matter who they are. Know where your spouse comes from, know what drives them, and know their fears and their anxieties. If you can understand that, it's the beginning to trying to learn how to treat them with the proper cover. And by the way, the universal value of the Rambam is just this idea. You have to understand what makes a person tick if you're going to show them respect. One of the most thoughtful things that I've found in my years dealing with people in the congregation are people who spend a moment to think about what's really valuable to that person. It's the solution to every machlokes, no matter man, women, whoever it is. You want to resolve a fight, you want to resolve a tension, stop and pause for a second and find out what's ticking them, what's the psychology behind the aggravation, where are they coming from? If you could appreciate that, you could learn to respect them and treat them the way you would want to be treated as well, which is don't trample on my vulnerabilities, build me up so that way I can function more effectively as a human being and as a mensch. All right, so I want to thank everyone. I don't know if we have, if you have any thoughts or topics or questions, that certainly would be wonderful. It's kind of lonely on this Zoom thing when everybody sort of has no screen and no volume on, so you don't really know if you're just talking to yourself. But I thank you and wish you each a good Shabbos, and thank you, Rachel, for organizing. And Mirza Shem, if you have suggestions for topics, I'd love to take them, and we can prepare them for each week. 20 minutes, half an hour each week, not too much. Mirza Shem.
Rabbi.
Hello.